Hey guys, the Superhero Bibliophiles episode you're about to listen to was originally part of the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club, an exclusive Patreon subscriber show I used to run a few years back. So if you're confused by out-of-date references or comments about the Patreon show, that's why. Now, enjoy the episode.
Hey guys, just a quick note before we get started with today's episode. I'm really sorry that I haven't been able to get these comic book episodes out sooner. Just been very busy, what with work and 2 kids and just everything else. I'm going to try to get these out once a month or so. I've got another one that's going to be coming up, recording just about a week from now at the time of this recording. So hopefully I will be able to get these out a little bit more timely for you. Again, as always, if there's anything you want to hear on here, if there's any comics you want me to talk about, please just drop me a line, either email superherocinephiles@gmail.com, or you can also contact me through the Patreon page or on any of the social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Thanks so much for your patience, and now here's the episode. Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and this is an exclusive members-only podcast available only to subscribers of my Superhero Cinephiles Patreon. And today we're discussing a new comic. It's been a minute since we've been out with a new episode, so sorry about the delay. But excited about what we have to talk. And our guest today is Nick. Nick, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Perry. Thanks very much. I appreciate that.
Well, thanks for coming in. It sounds like you changed something because now you're coming in much better than you were before.
Oh, good. Okay. Yes, I did, and I'm glad to hear that.
Okay. So we've spoken before. We already recorded an episode of the main show, and I can't remember.
You're giving them the secrets behind the scenes.
For the life of me, I can't remember the movie we talked about right now.
Jumper. So
Jumper, that's right.
You can look forward to that.
Right. Yeah. No wonder I forgot it, because it was a pretty forgettable movie.
Yep.
But today we're talking about something a little bit more fun, and people can wait. You'll hear that episode out in, I think, December or something like that. But
our discussion is fun. I don't know whether that movie is fun, having now revisited
the discussion was fun. I'll give you that. Yeah. Today we're talking about something that actually is enjoyable, that actually is fun, and so I'm hoping we'll also have a fun discussion about it. But before we get into that, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, because they won't get a chance to hear you on the main episode where I asked you to do this song and dance already.
Yeah, so my name is Nick Baldwin. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Nick Loves Movies. That's NICLUVS. Nick Loves Movies. My wife and I, we have a podcast together called In Love with Movies. So your listeners can find that anywhere, on podcasts are found. That's just In Love, with Movies. And on that podcast, unsurprisingly, we discuss love and movies. A little bit more specifically, kind of getting into people's histories in love and how they kind of can get to know each other more deeply through movies, as well as our angle on the movie side of things. So yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, go find us. Love to have more of your listeners. Always a good crowd.
Yep. And what is your history kind of with like superheroes, superhero media, comics, all that stuff?
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I probably was like into comics and superhero stuff-ish back in the day. I can remember cleaning out my closet at some point when I was in high school, and I had a bunch of like just random Spider-Man comics, and I think maybe we discussed it a little bit last time. I had like these posters from the Death of Superman arc, and the Reign of the Superman arc is really what it was. It was like 4 different posters I remember I had on closet doors in my room that, one of each of the different Supermen. Anyway, somewhere along the line, I convinced myself that wasn't a cool thing, and I let society and other pieces of my life tell me, oh, no, that's not important and you shouldn't bother. So I kind of stopped for a long time, and then actually kind of related to today, it was the TV show The Walking Dead, and then me wanting to like actually see what the differences were and similarities with the comic book that caused me to start reading that comic book, which then got me back into comic books in general. And now I'm someone who has like a $60 pull list at his local comic book store. So
that's how they get you. Yeah, I remember I had when I'd gone through that same kind of thing, except my solution to it wasn't to stop it. It was just to keep it hidden and never talk about it. um,
Yeah.
and so I was consistent all the way through. But I don't have a $60 pull list now, but I definitely did once upon a time when I was working at a comic book store in high school. It was like I think about half my paycheck just went to covering my comic book habits.
My wife and I have this way that we do things in terms of finances, and I recommend it for others. I don't know how you do it, Perry, but we do it mine, ours, mine, ours, yours situation.
Mhm.
So like each of us, collectively contributes at some percentage, some larger percentage of our paychecks to, the hours fund, and that
Mhm.
pays bills, etc., groceries. And then there's the mine and yours, and
Mhm.
I don't get to judge her for buying candles, and she doesn't get to judge me for buying lots of comic books. So it's a good system for us.
We've got something like that. I've got income from my publishing stuff that goes into my US bank account, and I've got a US credit card, and I mostly use that to pay for my comic book stuff. All
Cool.
the income from my Japanese sources that goes into a bank account, and that's basically what we pay for most expenses. And then my wife will contribute to that on occasion when she's got the money, because right now she's still on maternity leave.
Yeah. How's the little one?
They're both doing good. He's actually sleeping down the whole night now, so that's good. He's just shy of 4 months at the time that we're recording this.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you're starting to get something close to a full night's sleep.
Yes, yeah, yeah. But today, and like you mentioned, kind of connected to Walking Dead, we're discussing Invincible, which is another one of those another book by Robert Kirkman that he had done through Image. He had also created The Walking Dead, which I'm not sure if anybody knows about it, but it's it was this little zombie comic book, and they turned it into this TV show. I don't know if anybody's ever watched it, but it's out there somewhere, I think.
Doesn't seem to have been popular. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
not sure
yeah.
if anybody knows.
So what's your history with Invincible?
Yeah. So this is great because I was alluding to that. Invincible was one that, so I mentioned I got back into comics because of The Walking Dead. I started picking up other things, and a ton of people, like podcasts, as well as like my local comic book store, a few people I actually spoke to that were into comics that kept being like, if you like The Walking Dead and you like superheroes, you should read Invincible. And everybody's
Mhm.
like, you should, you should, you should. And I was like, yeah, okay, awesome. So I got one of the like first volumes, and then it sat on my shelf for months, just
Mhm.
like 'cause I was busy reading other things. I kept picking up other stuff that like felt like a more of a priority. And then the TV show came along. So your listeners may pick up on, I'm obviously very big into movies and television as well. And specifically the voice cast for the TV show that was coming up was just so stellar, just out of the park, next level, that I was started to get excited for the TV show. But I wanted to, unlike what I had done for The Walking Dead, I decided I specifically wanted to have read the comics first and then be
Mhm.
watching sort of in that order, where like I was ahead of it. So I went back and finally pulled that thing off my shelf after I read the first Ultimate Collection. I don't know. I remember you said you hadn't read necessarily a whole thing, so that's the first 13 issues.
Mhm.
I then was like nervous that maybe the show, because I kind of said something in my comic book store. I was like, oh, I'm sure they're not going to go past the first 13 issues, right? In the first season of 8 episodes. And that person thankfully was like, I don't know, they might jump around and do some stuff. So I grabbed like, I can't remember if it was just one or two more of the Ultimate Collections, but
Mhm.
by the time I made it through sort of that branch of comic books, this was the only thing I was reading. Like I started putting my weekly, monthly issues, letting them sit on the shelf, and I just started devouring all kinds of things. And then it wasn't long I was buying, these giant, huge
Damn.
compendia, and so now I've got all of the things and have read my way through it. I devoured it in probably like, I want to say it was like 2 months or something like that,
Mhm.
which 144 issues, at
Yeah.
least for me, you know what I mean? I don't have that kind of time usually.
No, that's a lot. Yeah, I remember doing those monster read-throughs back when I had free time, but like
Right?
lately,
Before kids, before
yeah, before kids, before work, before fucking adulthood and all that.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
but no, I mean, like it takes me like I usually read comics at night after the kids go to sleep and everything, and I'll just sit there with my Kindle and I'll read for like an hour or two, and I usually get through maybe one trade, one standard like 6-issue trade paperback a night or something like that. So and I remember I did have the Spawn Compendium. I picked up
Okay.
that, the first one, and that's like the first 50 issues. It took me like a good month to get through that, if probably longer, I think. Um,
Well,
and
that's got beautiful
yeah,
art, doesn't it?
yeah. Oh,
I feel like the art
gorgeous.
always slows me as much as word bubbles do. Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
But so my introduction, like I had not read Invincible, just like you. I had the first book, and the first book of the regular trade. So this only covers issues 1 to 4.
Okay, so
Um,
you've only read ever the first 4
I've
issues.
only read the first 1 to 4 issues. I have seen the
Oh.
first episode of the TV show, though. I
Okay.
haven't seen
Okay.
anything past that, because kind of similar to you, I watched the first episode. I'm like, wow, this is pretty good. But I'm gonna put it on the shelf because I know I bought the first trade, and I'm like, I want to try and read some of the comics first, and then I'll get back to it eventually. Plus, my Amazon is we have the Japanese Amazon Prime, and most of the streaming we do is connected to the American stuff with the VPN. So it's a pain in the ass to switch back and forth, and I hate
Sure.
Amazon Prime's interface. I mean, the only reason we have Amazon Prime is for the shipping, really. Otherwise, I would not bother with it, just because their interface is a pain in the ass. So I had the first book sitting on my Kindle for probably a good year or so. I think I bought this first book. I think they had a sale when the TV show debuted, and I think that's when I picked it up.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so I hadn't read it, but I had read Kirkman's stuff before. Not The Walking Dead, though. This is Invincible is actually the first time I've read one of Kirkman's creator-owned stuff. Most of my exposure to him comes through his Marvel work, because before he started doing all this stuff for Image, he was doing a lot of work for Marvel. He had done a run on Ultimate X-Men. He had done the Irredeemable Ant-Man. I haven't read that, but that's on my Kindle as well. And he had done a bunch of other stuff, like, I think he had done like a Captain America run. He'd done a bunch of different like fill-in gigs and stuff like that for Marvel for a good couple of years there. And then
I don't think I knew that. Like, I knew that was a tendency of a lot of creators before you have a creator-owned thing. Like, I knew that, but specifically all of what you just listed about Kirkman, there's a bunch of things in there that I know I read bits of, and other bits that I've like got on my list that I want to read. So, yeah.
So the comics industry is interesting because to get work at Marvel or DC, you first have to have something out there, like some sort of creator-owned stuff out there. But to get a high-profile creator-owned book, you have to have enough exposure in your name where your name is known enough, and you usually only get that through working for Marvel or DC.
Right.
So I think the route, at least from what I've seen, a lot of creators, what they'll do is they'll put out some like small self-published creator-owned stuff, or maybe they'll get it. They'll be able to get it picked up by a small publisher. And they'll use that to get noticed, and then they'll do some work for Marvel, for DC, and then sometimes they'll stay with Marvel or DC while still doing creator-owned stuff, or they'll commit completely to the company model, or they'll do some Marvel DC stuff, and then they'll do some creator-owned stuff, and they'll maybe go back and forth. I know Ed Brubaker did something like the latter. He had gotten in through some creator-owned stuff, got noticed by DC and then by Marvel, hit it big with Captain America, and then went on, and now he's pretty much only doing creator-owned stuff now through Image, I believe.
Yeah, and I think because like I mentioned, I like did it back in the day, but I like that whole boom during the 90s, you know what I mean? Like, I would have been so young right when it was first happening, and then disconnected from it and didn't really plug back in until well past, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. And so like, for example, the birth of Image Comics, I've learned about through other shows and things like that talk about it, some of the history, and its whole thing being of, creator owned specifically, like that was its shtick, and you know what I mean, that like you would come here and every single thing you would walk away with, and then whether that ended up being entirely accurate down the road may have been another thing. But that's fascinating to think about all the other stuff you just mentioned too.
Well, yeah, it was a weird thing with Image, because they were trying to create a shared universe early on, but also have each person own their share of it, which definitely caused some difficulties when creators left, when got adapted to other media. So yeah, there was when you're doing a shared universe, creator owns There are going to be some issues that come with it. Yeah, exactly. Now what they're doing though is they're doing this, and Early Image was very just kind of, I mean, look, the books look gorgeous, and there's some of them that outside of like Savage Dragon, the writing quality was not the best, we'll say. But like, you know, I do have a soft spot for it. I've got a soft spot still for like Spawn, for like the Jim Lee Wildcats. But the Rob Liefeld stuff, you can leave that behind. but when Jim Valentino became the head of Image, he had kind of rebranded it into being pretty much only this idea, really running with this idea of creator owned. And so since then, they've been putting out a lot of really good creator owned stuff.
Yeah.
And,
which is like probably when they get into that sort of generation. I was trying to think of the right word. The era, I guess, of the Walking Deads and
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you got like, and you know, really kind of genre defying, right? Not just all superhero stuff like the Early Image stuff was, but really having this stuff that crosses all these different genres.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that storytelling is one of the things that really attracted me. I'm not surprised, based on the first 4 issues, the fact that you did not keep reading doesn't surprise me in the least. It is so, like, its only premise in the first 4 issues is, what if your dad was Superman?
Right.
And then you got superpowers. And then, like, I even wrote a note as I was rereading some stuff for this podcast, and I'm sorry if I'm taking us off in a different direction.
No, that's fine. Go right ahead.
But like, that first 4 issues, it is so basic. It almost feels like they didn't know what they wanted to do with it. Are you going to be upset if I talk spoilers?
No, go ahead.
Okay, good. So listeners,
like I said, I've seen the first episode of the TV show, so I know what happens at the end of that.
Good, and that's the big thing, because that doesn't happen until, I wrote this down. I made so many notes because there's things like that are just in such different order. End of 7, the very end of issue 7 is when his dad like turns. And the thing is, they do a lot to like not telegraph it and not show any of that, and instead they spend those 7 issues really just building up this relationship with his dad, and you feeling the love, and you feel a lot of that, and they've kind of built this whole familial thing. And then it's like, you know what I mean? It's like such a huge gasp moment when you see that he's the one who's, because the way that they do it is they just like, they do kind of the same thing as in the show. They like show these little scenes and bits of all these other Guardians of the Globe characters, and then they come back and it's a dark room, and then blood is just splattering everywhere, and it's just panels of blood and blood and blood and blood. You don't see a single thing of him until the very last, like, final splash page of the issue, and then it cuts, and it's just like, you have no idea why, you don't know what's happening, and then there's another series of issues of like, why, what is he doing, what's the, and you do, and in the show that's a huge difference, because in the show it is like right out of the gate, and in fact they start foreshadowing it. I feel like the moment Mark comes home in episode 1 and says like, I've got my powers today, he kind of like, his dad, played by J.K. Simmons, like clocks that in a way that is just like very intense, and is sort of like, oh, this totally changes everything, and it sort of gives you that vibe as you're watching it. But if you read that in the comics, and it may have been a while since you did it, it goes by, they literally intentionally make it like an earlier panel where they're just talking about their days and nothing happens. And they're just sort of mentioning what's going on in their lives. There's no reaction. The characters are still being drawn with dots for eyes, so there's even less emotion on their faces. And again, his dad, just no reaction whatsoever. And so you don't realize or think anything of the fact that his dad is, as you eventually find out, he's intensely noticing his son has gotten powers in the show, because that's his cue to like, okay, now we're going to take over the world basically, and then like, now I need to start training him, and now I need to do these other things, and it's a completely different setup, and it's fascinating to me how that happened. But I'll stop rambling now.
No, that's all good. And one of the things there are a few things that you said in there that I wanted to touch on. First thing is about those first 4 issues being kind of basic, which I actually kind of liked, because I feel like there is this big push to like, you know, if you're going to do a superhero comic book that's an original character, you have to do something that, you know, breaks the genre or redefines the genre or something. There has to be some sort of twist that sets it apart. But honestly, like, I like, and this might just be me, but I just like reading superhero shit. So for me, I'm like, I'm loving it. It's really cool. This idea of like, having the dad who is also who is a superhero, and just like having that being like his main day job, and having that open relationship with the family. And he's coming late to
Yeah.
dinner, and he comes in, he's like, oh, sorry, there was a flood in Egypt and all that. Like I thought all that stuff was really great. And I love that, he's very much like a Peter Parker type character. And that
Yes.
kind of
And
like,
yeah.
and I thought all that was great, and I love reading that stuff. I'm a sucker for all that stuff. So I thought all of that, like, and when he stands up to the bully and all that, I loved reading all of that. And I liked how just kind of like matter of fact it is. Like you said, there's when he says that, I think I'm getting superpowers, he says, I think I'm finally getting superpowers, and there's just like this complete disinterest. Like,
nothing.
Yeah, and his mom's just like, that's nice. Can you pass the potatoes? And
Yeah.
that's it. It's just, and I thought that was great. I thought that was awesome. I loved how that was handled in there.
It's definitely unique and different, and I liked it. But I think that from what I've heard, they struggled to find an audience, and I think it's unfortunately because of that. They were kind of, I think, maybe trying to just do. I mean, it still stays a family drama throughout the entire 144 issues, but I think it starts off as like a sort of low-key family drama, if that makes sense. Like you're saying, it's just kind of seeing what life would be like, you know what I mean? Like, and if you and your spouse just had to like kind of get on board with this, you know what I mean? It's like, I feel like there's some things happening in the comics with Superman and things like that with Lois, and certainly maybe the TV show, which I haven't gotten a chance to watch yet, but like, there's not as much of that, like, 10, 20, 15 years down the line with Lois and Clark of, they've got their kids and they're just like chilling, you know what I mean? They're just like, he goes off and saves the day. And then, I think it's made even more poignant too by the fact that the mom is like a stay-at-home mom too. So it's so very low key. She doesn't have her own thing. It's just like, oh, that's nice. And yeah.
There was, they're not doing it right now in the Superman comic books, but the Rebirth era. So it was, Dan Jurgens was doing Action Comics, and you had Peter Tomasi doing Superman, and that was very much like that family drama dynamic where they had Lois and Clark, and they had their son Jonathan, who's like a kid basically, like a 8 or 9 or 10 or something along those lines. Sure. And it was very much that kind of dynamic, and it was such a fun run. I loved reading that, and I was actually kind of disappointed when they had because now they had aged John up, and now he's an adult, and now he's got his own Superman book. And it was, and I haven't read that book, but I understand it's really good. I had read one of the books that came after, where it was a little bit dealing with him as Superman, and it's good stuff. I'm not going to say it's not, but I did kind of miss that family dynamic that it had before.
I think the thing, sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
No problem, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I agree with you, and I think the thing I like about these two Kirkman things, Invincible and The Walking Dead, is it's like, it's taking place in a world of like absolute, sci-fi fantasy, right? Like, superheroes exist and we're just all accept that. Zombies are real and it's happening. But the real story isn't happening. It's certainly not like, oh, we're gonna go fight this thing. Like, what matters in a story is what's happening within the individual characters and what's really taking place in those family dynamics. And eventually it becomes some found family types of dynamics later on for both of those, understandably. But even The Walking Dead, pretty much all the way to the end, you've got like the Carl Rick relationship, and it's all about those pieces more than it is ever about the zombies that have to be killed or the new big bad that's coming to threaten you.
Yeah. And when I saw the first episode of the TV show, the Omni-Man's turn, it's such a dramatic shift, right? It completely changes what you had expected going into it. And I get why they did it for TV and everything, but I do kind of feel like the way that Kirkman has handled here in the book, like you said, I got to the end of the book and I was kind of surprised. I'm like, oh, wait, I thought he was supposed to go bad. I guess they're not doing it right away. I had expected that to happen in the first book, and the fact that it didn't, and you said it doesn't happen until issue 7, I think that's a really good way to do it, because like you said, it builds up the family dynamic. You can build up the relationship, and I found myself really getting invested into his relationship with his dad. And because usually in these types of stories, you would usually see a few different types of reactions. You usually see like the father trying to keep the son away from the superhero life, right? Like trying to, discourage him from it or something like that. Uh, or, just try and like get him to continue having, at least, telling him like, okay, well, you got superpowers, but you should wait and
Yeah.
until you're a little bit older because it's risky and all that. But he doesn't do that. And I know there's reasons why, but he's very much kind of like, okay, well, let's do this together. And I
Uh-huh.
think that's really cool. I think that's a really cool way to do it. It's a nice little twist on that dynamic. Like
Yeah. And if you
there's this 2 pages where they're flying together.
okay, yeah.
And and Omni-Man just kind of flies away right away, and he's like, "Oh, sorry, there was a fire over there."
Then he comes back.
And and he just keeps on going back and forth, and he's just kind of like he's not really sure how to really process it. And I think it's really cool. It's really cool the way that they handle that. And I found myself liking that a lot more than what we got in the TV show.
Yeah, what I was going to say, so I also rewatched, so I knew you had said issues 1 through 4 was what you thought you had not read. So I made sure I read at least that much. I think I got to like 6 or 7 again on my read through. And then I was kind of flipping through to remind myself of big story plots that had happened in the rest of the show, or the rest of the books rather. But the show, I also was just watching on my commutes in and on the train. And it struck me that like they make Omni-Man way more menacing, way faster. And like I said, even in that moment where he says he's got his powers and his dad kind of like gives him a look, right? And they animate that in a way that's also like intense and like, oh, now it's kind of like almost again it shifts the tone, but you're not as surprised. Like there's almost that expectation that there's something under the surface from his dad about him getting powers. And then when something happens at the very end where his dad doesn't turn out to be such a great guy, maybe after all, I feel like the first 8 episodes of that show, the first full season, really sets Omni-Man up as like an utter dick and just almost zero redeeming qualities, which I did not love. Like, I think the only reason that the show works on any level in terms of the father-son dynamic is purely based on the animation, but also more importantly, the vocal acting of J.K. Simmons. Like he at the very end, because you haven't obviously, it sounds like haven't gotten there. If you get to the final, they do it in episode 8 is when the dad turns. And there's so many things that I also made notes on that like happen way earlier in the show than they happen in the comics. But his dad turns in 8, and like you do feel his conflict, you know what I mean, in those moments. But that conflict almost, you're like, well, where is that coming from? You've kind of seemed pretty singularly obsessed with doing things this entire 8 issues, whereas in the comics for those, or sorry, 8 episodes in the comics, like you said, they spend a lot of page time just sort of having them being father and son and really building up. There's also a lot more like sexy time between his dad and his mom in those first 7 issues that there is in the TV show. Like in the TV show, by I think like episode 3 or something, his mom is suspicious that maybe the dad is lying about things and is like starting to uncover with others that the dad in fact had killed the Guardians. In the comics, she's completely shocked and just blown away by that. And to some degree I'm like, well, that's good that they gave her character something more to do. There's other ways that they did a lot of good updating for the show. But on the other hand, to me, it's like when you do other things, especially later on in the comics, like the dad comes back and there's these redeeming times, and I feel like it's going to be hard to buy that he really did care about his family because they didn't spend the time showing you that he cared about his family in the show. Whereas like you're saying in the comics, they do.
Right. I mean, and like I said, I've only seen that first episode, but one of the impressions I got from the first episode, and it sounds like this is continuing on. This is probably true of the entire season, is that I did kind of had that feeling like, well, maybe he doesn't really care about this family. Maybe they're just kind of like a means to an end for him. And that was kind of the feeling I got when I got to the end of that episode. Whereas here, just in these first 4 issues, you can tell that there's genuine affection he has for his son and his wife. And and I like that a lot. I love the family dynamics in here. I mean, it's really fitting that this first trade is titled Family Matters.
Yeah, right.
Which, just as a side note, I love that the high school is Reginald Vell Johnson High School,
And the principal kind of looks
and
like
the principal
Reginald
kind of
Bell
looks like
Johnson.
him. Yeah, yeah. I thought that was great.
Oh man,
I
yeah.
I noticed that in one of the panels. I'm like, wait a minute, that didn't say Reginald Vell Johnson High School, did it? Then I checked it. I'm like, nope, nope, yeah, it did.
Whenever you get to the Pentagon, there's this ongoing joke there where it just says parking in the rear, and I am convinced that that's meant to be, like a sex joke of some kind. So, um, yeah, it's I really do. It's kind of disappointing. Like I think that they just felt that for a show they were definitely going to lose people, and I think they were probably gun shy because it was one of those books in the first 6 months that were kind of touch and go.
Right.
But I'm with you. Like the thing that's unique is that family dynamic. And like any good, you compare, I'm going to throw this out there, Game of Thrones, the first few seasons versus, maybe the last ones where things just kind of jumped and lurched forward. Like stuff that happens with character development doesn't feel earned if you just have a 10-year time jump all of a sudden,
Right.
and have new actors playing all of these different roles. Like, I don't know any of what's taken place between them. Why should I be emotionally invested? I don't really care when they then, stab each other's eyes out and things of that nature. As opposed to, you have spent the time to be like, this is a loving family, and this is a shock that this man who has seemed like a loving father all along could possibly be doing any of this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What did you think of the teen team dynamics with Mark?
So the teen team thing, that one of the notes that I had that I just thought kind of cracked me up is like, I feel like there's so many things about this book that you can easily tell that it was being published in the early 2000s by younger straight white men. And I love these creators, but and my headspace would have been right there with them back then, I'm sure. But just, for example, when you brought up Teen Team, he first meets them because they both go to like stop somebody who is, and I think it's the Mahler twins, and they are stealing video game consoles.
Yeah.
To then you find out later, like they're going to build a supercomputer using the processors or something. But like just the idea that like your first big villain fight is I'm gonna stop some guys from robbing, the latest Xbox because it's gonna not be able to be available to other people, and that to me is just so funny. That alone is very humorous. So
I did think it was kind of fitting for the fact that he is a teen superhero, though, and I thought that was kind of I thought that was kind of cool.
I thought it was on the nose, and then obviously his first sort of major thing being his own teacher is the evil villain. So
right, well, that's very much like the whole. One of the things I think Buffy the Vampire Slayer did really well was that whole high school is horror movie. So there's some sort of like horror element or horror twist to these concerns and issues that kids have when they're in high school. So your boyfriend is pressuring you to have sex, and then after you have sex with him, he turns into a monster, and and that's literally what happens here. Or right. You've got a crush on the new teacher, and then she turns out, but if you get involved with the new teacher, that's dangerous because she's a praying mantis and she'll devour you. It's like those little twists, those little metaphors that are represented through, and I think it's really cool to have that here, like the whole idea of the teacher being the villain and all that, and but also wrapping it in with like a serious issue, the fact that he had this kid who had committed suicide because of the popular kids, and then that gives you you're like, okay, well, I'm not saying I agree with turning the popular kids into bombs, but I can kind of understand his motivation behind it, at least.
Yeah, at least as a couple of guys that I think were probably closer to, being the ones who might have, taken the ultimate dive due to a bully, as opposed to being the popular kids. I certainly can understand that. And then I like that there's that line where he's like, "Oh, it would have been so cliche if that was it. No, I want vengeance against like how it wrecked my whole life and how these popular kids have wrecked my whole." I also thought that was funny because, like, again, another teen thing, like, it's like never explicitly said, but I'm pretty sure there's the subtext there of like, so he's turning these popular kids into bombs.
Mm-hmm.
So he's killing the popular kids in the act, but he's also blowing up malls. And so he says some line about like, because all you kids just go, kill your brains out at the mall. So like on the one hand, I'm like, dude, I'm with you, and then on the other hand, I'm like, but really?
You can very much tell that that's the product of somebody who grew up in the 80s, right?
Because I feel like that's not even you and I's generation.
Yeah,
of,
I mean, I'm like,
that's not where I hung out. Like,
yeah, when I was a teenager, the malls were just like a place that we went to because the stores were there. We weren't hanging out in malls. Most of my friends and I, we hung out in like coffee shops or things like that. That was more our thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was that was funny. That was a definite kind of like, okay, I feel like this book was maybe should have been published in the 90s instead. It would have made more sense. But I think that also does kind of fit with what Kirkman's doing here, because there is a definite early 90s image sensibility in a lot of ways to what he's doing here. There's a lot of that kind of like 90s comics feel to it. It does feel like this was a comic book that could have come out in fact, I'm actually kind of surprised it doesn't specify the time period, because I think you could have very easily just made this a period piece. Yeah, taking place in the 1990s. I think it would have. In fact, I think that especially with the Reginald Bell Johnson references and all that stuff too.
God, that's such a good joke, though.
When did this book first come out?
I meant to Google that. I want to say it was 2000s, but it would have been like very, very early 2000s.
Right.
Let's see if we can both get to this without having too much dead air.
Yeah. So I got it up here now, the Wikipedia page. It looks like it was first 2003 is when it started coming out.
Okay.
So yeah, but even in 2003, like people had like cell phones and stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I remember like everybody I knew had a cell phone in 2003. So I mean, they weren't like smartphones or anything, but everyone had like the basic like Ericsson or Motorola type cell phones back then. So, but you don't see, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think we see like any sort of cell phones or anything like that in this, do we?
Yeah, in fact, there was some time in the first few issues there where I remember there being a thing where somebody calls them on a landline, and like it just that. I mean, that feels so dated. Anytime you see that in any piece of media these days,
right? Well, I think that's. And in my head, I'm imagining this takes place in the 1990s now, because I think that's the only way it really kind of makes sense. Which does kind of surprise me that they didn't. Huh?
I said that I think that does make sense, and I think that makes sense for Kirkman and Walker, the creators, because I gather they knew each other, they're friends, and they're about the same age, and so I know enough about Kirkman to know that he would have kind of grown up at that age and would have been a teenager through the 90s.
Yeah, I definitely know that, because I remember in interviews he talked about how much he loves like 90s characters, and like he's got a soft spot for like 90s Marvel and that kind of stuff. So I know all that's definitely true. But that's also a good segue to talking about the art, because I did want to talk about the art. I love the art in this. I think it's this nice kind of it's got this kind of simplicity to it. Like it's not overly detailed, and this is where it sets it apart from a lot of the early 90s stuff, is that it's got this very kind of simplified, almost animated-esque, like Bruce Timm type-esque style to it. And I think it works really well.
I like it a lot. I mentioned the eyeballs, that I remember that always jarred me just a little bit. And so right around, I wrote this down, issue 8. Issue 8 is when Walker, who had been doing all of the art as the co-creator and Kirkman had been writing, issue 8 is when Walker kind of like steps away and Ryan Ottley comes in to start drawing, and you start almost immediately seeing things like those eyeballs go away and things like crisper lines and more details, while still holding kind of the spirit of I think what you're talking about with the animation that Walker had created. And you mentioned Bruce Timm. It's also funny, there's some later issues because there's a character, I think he's called Darkwing, who's obviously a Batman ripoff. And they literally, like, when he's in his hometown, it's done like the Bruce Timm Batman animated series, where like all of the black, like everything behind is red, and then all the buildings are black, and that's how they interact with each other. So I just think that's a cool little detail that they clearly make a choice make a choice on. But I too, I really like the art, and I think that's why I knew I was going to want to watch the show too. Is there's just something, I don't know, something attractive about it. It's also like very colorful. I
Mm,
feel like colorful in a way that kind of like you said is simplistic. Like there's not so much happening that it's like you don't know what to look at on the page.
right.
I feel like I read a lot of modern comics sometimes and I'm like my eyes are darting all around the panel because there's just so much happening. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
where should my eyes go? Whereas this, I feel like almost every panel, there's no question. Your eyes just sort of automatically go to wherever the action is, wherever you're supposed to be looking.
Right. It's a good lesson in that economy of storytelling because yeah, when you've got, and I think I've definitely noticed that too. And I'd taken a coloring course recently, actually, with a colorist on Udemy, and he
Okay.
he makes a good point about talking about that. He's like, yeah, you can go through and you could color every little thing but you know what? That's going to be, you got to think about the reader experience because the while you may want to capture the realism of the scene or anything, you got to think about where's the reader's going to go, eye going to go, what is the most important information in the
Yeah.
scene, and and that's why you get things like more, you'll have like everything like the same color in the background or stuff like that because it makes it easier to follow the eye that way.
Yeah, but and then at the same time, I feel like it's done in such a way that like makes sense. Like I don't
Mm,
know, like it feels like it's almost like a camera lens focusing. Like I happen to have it turned to a page right now because we were talking about the teen team, so it's like their first interaction, and Mark is in his pajamas punching one of the Mauler twins, and you just see the punch, you see Mark, you see Mauler, and then it's like this purple in the background. But they have set up that they're like in a place where the lighting against the wall seems to be purple. But again, I feel like it's like if you were to just have focused the camera lens on exactly where that punch is happening,
mm,
what's in the background would have seemed just more like, the general color of the thing. So it
right.
doesn't feel like, I don't know. It's like it's
Mm,
almost like as if thinking about it like a movie director, because that's how I often think about things. Like you've chosen to point the camera in a place where having just a bunch of purple in the background doesn't feel like you're just being lazy and not, finishing the background. Like,
right. Yeah. Yeah.
which to me, I think that's a whole nother level because you have to not only do exactly what you're talking about with your colorist of where am I going to keep the focus, but how do I make sure that that makes sense in a way that I'm not just, only choosing to have the background be all one color
Right.
because that's going to keep focus.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. But that's another good example of how they do this because he. I want to make sure I get the. Did Corey Walker color this too, or
I think so. I think he was the artist and colorist at least until later on.
no? No, no. The colorist was Bill Crabtree.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right. My bad. My bad.
So yeah, but he does a really good job with this because he does capture the mood of the scenes. Like for example, that scene when you're talking about, it's nighttime, and there's like shades of blue to everybody, even though they are their own color, but there's like this blue filter over it as well, which
Yeah.
makes total sense for the fact. And then you compare it to the next day when they're in school, and it's much brighter lighting, so they're much more clear their own colors. There's no sort of filter type thing to it that way. So yeah, I think he does a really good job with that.
And I want to say Crabtree stays on as the primary colorist now that you
Okay.
mentioned it. I'm pretty sure. And so kind of the only thing that to me changes is like eyeballs. Like you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like Ryan Otley comes on and just is better at drawing eyeballs and apparently was better at also like getting things done on time compared to Corey Walker, I guess. I don't
Okay.
know for sure. Uh, but otherwise I feel like it's the same thing. It's Corey Walker's vision and Ryan Otley's just, producing it kind of thing.
Also, the another note I just realized the name of the mall. That's also the name of the mall in Back to the Future.
Oh, is it Twin Pines?
Twin Pines. Yeah, I just double checked it because I'm looking at that. I'm like, that sounds familiar. And I just looked it up, and that was the because I think that was the name of it in before at the beginning
Before he
of the
knocks
first
the
movie
Yep.
before he knocked it down, and then the name changes after it. It's like just Pine Mall or something like that afterwards.
Yep. Oh man, I miss the Twin Pines. That's such a good reference.
Mm-hmm.
Um
What do you think of the relationship with Eve?
yeah, so that sorry, I got distracted when we asked about the teen team. I like it. I like it. Um I like more of what they do relationship wise for Mark in the TV show. And part of that actually isn't because of Eve. It's that they do a much better job uh, painting a three-dimensional character who also happens to be far more diverse um, than the sort of generic uh, white girl that he kind of dates opposite Eve. And like just some other choices that kind of come off of this. And I'm sorry for spinning it that way, but like they do the kind of necessary drama eventually where Eve is dating his best friend, but in the TV show that never happens because his best friend is actually gay, which I especially like because when you reread these comics, another thing that makes it feel like it's from the early 2000s is there's lots of like that subtle homophobia of just two guys always saying, "Oh, this is so gay" to each other. And so it was nice that they not only don't have that, but they in fact leaned the other way. With regards to Eve, I like it. I don't know that I like where it goes later on. The first issues kind of that I know you had read, it feels kind of paint by numbers to me. It feels obvious that of course her and Rexplode are not going to work out, and it's sort of ham-fisted the way that they are flirting with each other. But then I guess you can make the argument of like that's kind of how flirting in high school goes. You know what I mean? Like nobody's subtle about it when it's nobody's able to hide it well. So yeah. And obviously you've got that scene then I think it serves for good fodder when his villain really becomes a villain in any teenager's eyes because he, embarrasses the crap out of him and in front of his whole class and with a girl that he clearly has feelings for, but he has to pretend like he doesn't have feelings for. So
yeah, no, yeah, I felt kind of the same way. I felt it was good to talk about because it is such a focus of these first 4 issues, like him trying to establish this friendship. The relationship feels like it's moving way too, because they go from having no idea about each other to suddenly they're like best friends.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a big jump, and we don't get enough about. Yeah, I get they're both superheroes, but still, you wouldn't just automatically trust everybody with all your secrets right away like this. I feel like there should have been some more development of them getting to that point.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. And I think that one could make a case that they first really start to bond and sort of the mystery that they solve in their teacher being the one who's doing things. But to your point too, of like, well, that comes after she has just been like, yeah, I'm even, here's my whole identity. And hey, you want to come, both of us switch into our superhero costumes behind the dumpster outside the school. Like,
yeah,
it's forced. It's fast and forced.
It's fast and forced. And I feel like it would have made more sense if, it would also have been a bit too coincidental if he had already been friends with her to begin with. But I think it would have been interesting to see this kind of situation where, and especially you could draw a comparison to high school, right? Like let's say you're on an extracurricular thing with the pretty girl you've got a crush on, and
right.
You think, okay, now we're in the same club, so now she'll definitely notice me, and she still doesn't care, right? I think if you played with that would have made it a little bit more interesting. Instead, it does kind of feel like, oh, so you're a superhero now, so that means you're worthy of my time, type of thing.
Yeah, and even still, it seems like, so we talk about this we don't necessarily have it as a topic, but it seems to come up a lot on our podcast because of the movies we cover. There's a lot of movies that just sort of are like, it feels like there's some cigar chomping executive who's like, there's got to be a romance in every movie. You know what I mean? And so there's just these movies that's like, one that comes to mind is A Few Good Men. Like they I think they gender bent a character just so that Demi Moore could play opposite Tom Cruise for them to then have a like will they won't they kind of quality within a movie that's a courtroom drama. And it's just like that did not need to be there.
Right.
And I feel a little bit of that happening here where it's just like, oh, well, we've got, our main protagonist superhero and there's the other pretty girl superhero. So it's got to be a thing. And that's kind of the only justification early on.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that relationship didn't really do much for me. And honestly, the heart of this book is really that family dynamic, that dynamic he has with his dad. That is what kept me turning the pages. Like every time Eve, when the focus shifted to his relationship with Eve, I found myself losing a little bit of interest. And then when Omni-Man comes back into the picture, I'm like, okay, now I'm more invested in it.
That's fascinating because I can totally see what you're talking about, having just reread these. But I will say the stuff that eventually happens with Eve, and
Mhm.
like there's some of that will they, won't they, and some of it's a little ham-fisted, and some of it's a little bit like, okay, get to it. But especially like later on, they eventually, surprise, do end up together, and then
Mhm.
there are layers to that relationship that start to take place, and depth and places that she makes him grow. And like one of the most interesting things I thought about Eve's character, and it happens in quits. Where's Eve quits? It's in issue 20, but it
Mhm.
happens in episode 6 of the, and this is like one of those things where it's like it was way far out, but I think they were right to do it earlier in the show, episode 6. She like quits being a superhero basically. She
Mhm.
says, "You know what? I could do way more good in the world by just going and doing good.
Mhm.
I'm not going to keep fighting bad guys and saving like, a couple of lives at a time. Like I'm going to go make some proactive positive impact."
Mhm.
And she goes off and starts, like feeding the hungry and saving villages from global warming and crap like that. And that also is such a unique thing that I feel like you just never, at least I don't ever see in comic
Mhm.
books. Like, and they managed to like let her be off doing her own thing and occasionally come back to help, so it doesn't feel like you've lost the action or you're not
Right.
getting your punchy fighty because you're still primarily getting the punchy fighty. But she comes back in and is kind of occasionally schooling Invincible and being like, this isn't all that there is. There's different ways to do this,
Mhm.
and I think that's one of the metaphors we mentioned earlier, that these art pieces, the way that they work best is with their metaphor. And like that idea of you not having to do things the way that your dad did or the way that society wants you to do is kind of a going theme, and I think she embodies that pretty well later on.
Mhm.
So
No, yeah, absolutely. Um, and that's interesting to hear. I think part of that is also just maybe just Kirkman growing as a storyteller and just learning
sure.
different lessons as he goes. Because yeah, I can, because he's not a bad writer or anything like that, but you can definitely see that there's an immaturity to the way he handles
Yeah.
the romantic relationship in these first four issues, and as that I could definitely see that changing. And so that's interesting to hear, like how it had changed into and bringing in bigger, larger questions about what does it mean to be a superhero and all that. That's so I'm looking forward to seeing more of that as I go through. Like I don't have any of the other books yet, but I am interested to check those out.
Yeah, I
Uh,
strongly recommend it. And especially like it sounds like you feel comfortable doing it on your Kindle. I don't have any kind of digital thing where it's big enough for me to feel like reading. So I always have these big
mhm,
physical books that I have to lug around. I strongly say yes. It's worth it because I think things really in the books, it's it makes more of an impact because of all the reasons we just said. But I do think the book does start to pick up with knowing what it wants to do with characters kind of after Omni-Man um shifts gears. And there's
mhm,
sometimes I wonder if maybe that's even because my understanding, and I could be wrong, but like with uh, um Walker and Kirkman as co-creators, like they were kind of writing and coming up with concepts and thinking about broad strokes about where they wanted the story to go together. But then, it sounded like Kirkman was writing like the actual scripts and getting in the stories and the details, and Walker was then having to do the art. And I guess after Walker wasn't doing the art anymore, I gather, I could be wrong, that he was helping out more with the like stories. So maybe
mhm,
that's actually like, because that's also happens to be the same exact place where he shifts out of doing the art is when Omni-Man turns, and then there's, like I'm saying, a little bit of a pickup and some more interesting storylines for other characters. So
mhm.
there's part of me that wonders if maybe it's not just Kirkman maturing but also having help.
That might be it too. Well, also I think you'd also mentioned that the when the twist happened, the book wasn't really doing so well. Uh, right, it was having trouble finding an audience. So I
Yeah,
wonder
that's
if
what I
like
gather.
I wonder how much of the twist was planned from the beginning and how much of it was they're like, well, let's try throwing a monkey wrench into this machine.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh, that'd be interesting to find out. I'm not sure if if they've ever talked about that or anything, but um,
Yeah, I don't know.
also I'm looking at the sketches here and the different early designs for Invincible's costume. And one of the things that really struck me about Invincible, ever since the first time I saw it, was the design of the
Mhm.
costume, and
Mhm.
because I do think it's this really cool. I like how they find a way to incorporate the Image logo into the design.
Right? Yeah, it's really kind of impressive, and it does still look good. It looks iconic as they have a whole conversation about it and make a big deal about you want to, make sure your suit looks cool.
Right. Yeah, I think it's such a smart design, right? It's this because you know what, the whole idea of the superhero having the letter on his chest, it's kind of a cliche, and it's
Right?
difficult to do it in a way that looks well. But
Hmm.
you know, all kudos to Walker. He found a really good way to incorporate that logo into this costume in a way that it looks really well. It completely works with the whole design.
Hmm.
And also
Hmm.
it's a nice nod to the character's publisher. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and I honestly I don't know that I had not connected those dots about the
Mhm.
publisher's logo until you just said that. Like I had connected, obviously, oh, it's an I in terms of Invincible,
Right.
but yeah, it's even almost the same font. It's like the exact
Right.
same
Yeah.
shape.
Well, in fact, that's one of the things I had my head canon, and I'd never seen anything to justify this. Is just what my impression was. Like, I had thought maybe Kirkman had thought, well, it's Image Comics. They've got that really cool logo, but they don't have so let's make a superhero that uses the logo. But then seeing the sketches here at the back, obviously that wasn't the original intention. So
Right.
there was just, I'm not sure at what point they came up with that or how they came up with it, but I thought that was I like that little detail in it.
You can almost imagine like the meeting taking place where like he's Walker has been like doing sketches and maybe showing him and different ideas, and then like it just like the light bulb occurs and he then
Mhm.
comes running into the room to show Kirkman like, oh my god, look, I've cracked it, look at this, and then they both start jumping up and down because they're so
Yeah.
excited at like how many layers it works on.
Yeah. Uh, so I think that's pretty much all I have to say about Invincible. Was the anything else you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I guess just a huge plug, not only for the show, if listeners want to kind of like decide whether they think they're interested in the broad stories. There's some major things that happen in the show by the end of that first 8 episodes
Mhm.
that don't even happen until like issue 34, 37 of the comics, and there's a lot more depth and detail that happens than in the comics. So I think that like the show's a plug, but then also just I really can't plug this comic enough. It's one of
Mhm.
those things where kind of like The Walking Dead, I guess, and this is maybe what he's known for, and that could be good or bad, the M. Night Shyamalan, but like right when you think you know what the book is about, it takes some huge turn,
Mhm.
and shifts everything and throws things in the works. There's some stuff that comes up in the show pretty quickly about Robot, but if you're in the issues, it like doesn't come up until I think 20 or so,
Mhm.
and like there's some cool, interesting things that take place there. Later on, there's really interesting things that continue to happen as you learn more about um, Viltrum and its culture and its history. And then there's also questions about like, um, can a man be violated sexually the same way that a woman often is violated sexually
Mhm.
in our media? And that I think is again another interesting question that's like I think it's something cool to toy with, and there's just like really interesting and cool ideas. Other than that, I guess I would just like cool, fun things. Science Dog versus Seance Dog. They changed it to Seance Dog because I think they made it more Doctor Strange. But I just love that like the idea of like he's a comic book nerd himself too.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And then the metaphor that keeps going through it, the one that I think comes up a lot, it for me is something I've been processing through, and then therefore this book I think meant a lot to me is also masculine rage and the idea of like there's just you're not supposed to basically we're trained not to show any emotion other than
Right.
anger. Like that's
Anger
it.
or laughter. Those are like the only two things. Yeah.
Fair enough. You're right. Anger or laughter. Like any depth, anything close to sadness, definitely not.
Right.
Um, and so there's a lot of that, and then there's like even when his dad, so I'm spoiling some things, but like his dad, obviously turns and then becomes conflicted later on, which is more viable in the comics. But like part of what he's conflicted with is like, this is how I was raised, this is how I was grown up, I was taught that this is the way to be. And that again is kind of a good metaphor for like, this is the society that raised me, and that's why I am the way that I am.
Right.
But then his son is the one challenging that idea for him, with him, because he's choosing not to take that path. And I think that's kind of a lot of the same stuff, is it's like us being able to kind of put down the baggage of previous generations, and just because society's told us that that's a way to be does not mean that that is the way to be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh yeah. I talk about that with a lot in my film class. I talk about that a lot with different movies that we've discussed. And one example is we had recently did Tokyo Sonata. It's a Japanese film class. So but one of the things in that or also another example would be Shall We Dance, which if you've never seen the original Japanese version, I definitely recommend it. It's a really underrated movie, surprisingly really good. But one of the things that's happening in there is, he's ashamed of the fact that he's taking dance lessons, right? And that kind of goes to this whole idea, right? The idea of like men aren't allowed to have any kind of emotion other than anger or laughter, right? You're not allowed to express affection. Especially with your son, right? Like I remember, there was I remember even in my own life, like I remember my dad was not unaffectionate, but I do remember there was a certain point that as I got older, like my dad stopped kissing me. I do remember there was a certain shift in that relationship. And from then on, it was just like hugs and handshakes after that.
Yeah.
And there was that definite, and I even still feel that myself, like, right. I feel that kind of thing myself. Like, one time we were talking about a movie and I started getting a little bit emotional, and I kind of like turned away, and I'm like, yeah, because that's the way that we were raised. So I'm looking forward to getting to that stuff, because that's something I really believe that is a huge problem that's not talked about enough, is the way that, just like, again, this whole idea of toxic masculinity and how much it damages women, how much it damages trans men, how much it damages gay men, but also how much it just damages cis straight men too. Like this idea that we're not allowed to express the full range of human emotions that we experience just as human beings is absolutely ridiculous,
right? And it's what leads to all the other terrible things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I agree with you. Yeah, we're on the same page. I could have a whole other hour conversation.
We probably could, yeah. But anyway, Nick, thanks so much for coming on and talk about Invincible. I will say to anybody who's curious about this and they haven't read the comics, I think at this point I'm maybe the only one who hadn't read it by this point, but
I guarantee you're not. There's other listeners.
Okay. But I will say that one of the things I recommend, because I went with the shorter, 4-issue volume, just because I wasn't sure what to expect from it.
Yeah.
Like I said, the only Kirkman stuff I had experienced was his Marvel stuff, and it didn't blow me away, right? It wasn't like, oh, this is so good, I want to check out his other stuff. I'm just kind of like, it's okay, it's not bad or anything like that, but it's not like Grant Morrison where I have to pick up, so that was something.
Everything and find their name on every publication.
Right, exactly. That wasn't kind of the thing that I had with his Marvel stuff. So I had heard about Invincible and stuff, so I thought, well, let me just give the first 4 issues a try and see if I like it, and then I'll expand after that. I will say I enjoyed these so much, and like you said, a lot of the bigger stuff happens later on. I would recommend getting some of the bigger collections instead, because even though I haven't, I definitely want to read them, and I think if you want a taste of what is really happening, I think getting those bigger collections would definitely be a better idea.
Yeah, and I can personally attest to the fact that you can easily find that first Ultimate volume that I'm talking about that has the first 13 issues. Because I had to repurchase it to read the first 4 issues again, because that's what I started with, and I sort of was like, if I don't like it by the end of this, then I'll be done. I definitely liked it by the end of it, but I also have therefore given it to other people, and then that's been what got them into it, but I never see it again. So yeah, it's out there and you should get it. And I say get the Ultimate Edition. It's a little bit more expensive, but if you're not into it by the end of that first volume, you'll also be able to sell it really easily, and you'll know very much so if you're into it or not by then. So
I'll say, if you're a digital reader like me, the Image tends to have a bunch of sales that come up fairly frequently on Amazon. So if you go to comiXology.com, it redirects you to their Amazon site, and there's a section called Comics Deals at the top, and they always have like all their sales are posted up there. And Image fairly frequently will have like a kind of like a complete sale or like, you know,
Okay.
something like that. And
Sure.
Invincible will almost always be in there. So you could easily get it through that. So just keep an eye out for that and you'll be able to find it.
That's smart. I need to get myself one of them fancy tablet things that I
Oh,
can read
and
off of
like
and save myself a ton of money in space.
I love it. I love it. And because when I moved out here, or when my parents, I kept all my comics back in my parents' place, and then when my parents
Sure.
decided to downsize, I had to get rid of them. So, and there's no way I can afford to ship all those graphic novels, all those single issues back to Japan. And
Yeah.
even if I was able to ship them over here, I have no place to actually keep them,
I was just
and
gonna
I
say.
have no place to buy new ones because there's no like American comic book stores unless I want to pay, you know, through the nose on shipping. So I switched over to digital comics, and I love it. Like I know some people prefer reading the physical stuff, but if you get a decent sized tablet, like I've got a Kindle 10 here,
Okay.
and the size is like perfect for reading comics if you want to read them if you want to read the whole page. But it's also really good if you just want to do the guided view thing where it goes from panel to panel. So
Mm.
I often do it like that.
Yeah.
But you could definitely read them the other way too. Like to show you one example here. Sorry for people who aren't reading, but you see it fills up like the whole page. It's like perfect size.
Yeah. Yeah. And it looks like the frame is actually the size of like a floppy
Yeah.
comic book that you
Yeah.
would, yeah.
So
Yeah.
like the Kindle 10 is perfect for this kind of thing. And you know you can get the Kindle 10 I got because it's probably the cheapest one on the market. So it's really cheap. It's definitely, I got this on Prime Day for like, I think like $90. So it was totally worth the investment.
Good to know. Good to know. I literally wrote it down.
Okay, Nick. So why don't you tell people where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, sure. If you want to hear me talking about comic books, movies, or, you know, there's this thing called IO Psychology that I also chat about sometimes on Twitter. You can find me at Twitter and Instagram at Nick Loves Movies. That's NICLUV, Nick Loves Movies. And then please, please, please check out my podcast that I do with my wife. That's a lot of fun conversations like this where we kind of let things go where things go and chase rabbits down holes in terms of conversational topics. But we, you know, hopefully we're working on getting Perry on too. So if you're a fan of Perry's, we'll see if we can get him on a future one as well. We're just looking for dates. But that's In Love with Movies. You can find us for again, Instagram and Twitter at the letter N, Love with Movies, all spelled out. N, Love with Movies. All spelled out. That's at In Love with Movies, all spelled out. Now I just said that like way more times than I even meant to, but you know, what's that, rule of threes or whatever? So yeah. Find us there on the socials, and then you can find our podcast anywhere that podcasts are found.
And that information will all be on the Patreon page as well, so you can find it there. Yep. And as for us, thanks so much for subscribing. Obviously, if you're getting this show, you are a subscriber, so thank you for your support. As always, you can reach out to me, superherocinephiles@gmail.com. You can also comment on the Patreon page. If you have any suggestions for anything you'd like me to cover, any comics you want to talk about, you want to know about, just drop me a line, let me know. Otherwise, thanks so much for your support, and I will talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening, God bless.